The Appalachian Mountains are as beautiful as they are unforgiving. Deep within the hollers and ridges, there are places where sunlight barely cuts through the canopy, and where silence feels alive. This is story number 1 in our Appalachian Deep Woods Horror series, a first-hand survivor account of a night that should have been ordinary, but turned into a waking nightmare. A lone traveler sets out to camp in the wilderness, far away from any town, only to discover that he is not alone. As dusk falls and shadows stretch long, something begins to stalk him in the woods. Not quite animal, not quite human. What follows is a chilling night of survival, fear, and the realization that the Appalachian wilderness hides secrets older and darker than folklore dares to tell. Told in a cinematic first-person style, this story will make you feel the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant howl of wind through the pines, and the creeping dread of knowing you are being watched. Subscribe for more true Appalachian horror stories and deep woods encounters. Thumbs up, like, and share to support our channel and keep these stories alive. If you think you could survive a night like this, listen closely. The Appalachian woods remember every soul that enters. The Appalachian woods breathe in silence, not the kind that comforts, but the kind that unsettles. These mountains are older than memory, their roots tangled with secrets, their valleys heavy with whispers carried on the wind. People say the trees here have seen too much: wars, wanderers, lives cut short, and things that were never meant to be named. Step too deep into the hollers, and the sunlight fades quicker than it should. The paths vanish, the air thickens, and if you listen carefully, you might hear footsteps that don't belong to you, moving just behind, never too close, never too far. Tonight, we open the doors to 10 stories from the Appalachian Deep Woods. Stories passed in hushed tones. Stories locals warn outsiders never to repeat. They're not myths. They are not legends. They are memories carved into the bark, buried in the soil, and waiting for those who dare to wander too far. So, settle in. Keep your eyes open. And remember, in the Appalachians, it's not just the living who walk the trails at night. It was the kind of place most maps forgot. Laurel Hollow sat like a scar in the ridges of the southern Appalachians, a sagging handful of clapboard houses, a shuttered gas station, and a church with a bell that hadn't rung in 30 years. To passers-by, it looked like abandonment. To the locals, it was survival. There was one story they never laughed at, though. The story of the Lantern Man. My grandfather used to tell it to me in his kitchen, where the linoleum curled at the corners and the light bulb swayed with every gust that rattled the mountains. He'd lower his voice, lean forward, and say, "Don't go near Laurel Hollow after dark, boy. If you see a lantern swinging between the trees, don't follow it. Don't even look too long. That light don't belong to the living." I never believed him, not until the night I saw it myself. It was October, years later. I was 23, restless, and foolish enough to think the woods didn't scare me. My buddy Travis had grown up near Laurel Hollow, and we were driving back roads in his rusted-out Chevy, drinking gas station beer, when he suggested we stop. "You ever heard the lantern story?" he asked with a grin. "From my grandfather." Travis laughed. "Old-timers love that crap. Come on, I'll show you where it started. It's just a hike." The sun was sinking when we pulled off the road. The woods swallowed us quick, dense laurel thickets, branches low enough to claw our jackets. There was no trail, not really, just a winding deer path. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. Not even crickets. After half an hour, Travis stopped. "This is it," he said, pointing at a clearing. All I saw were trees, crooked, hunched, their roots jutting like bones. But then I noticed something strange. A wooden post, half-rotted, driven into the ground. At its top, rusted hooks. "That's where they found him," Travis said, voice lower now. "Man from town. Got lost out here in '52. Carried a lantern, looking for his dog. They found a lantern hanging from that post. But not him." The air had turned colder, though I couldn't say why. The sun hadn't fully set yet. Still, my chest felt tight. "Let's head back," I muttered. Travis smirked. "Scared already?" Before I could answer, something flickered at the edge of the clearing. A light. Small, pale, moving between the trees. "Probably hunters," I said, but the words felt weak. The light was too steady, too slow. Not a flashlight beam, not fire. It swayed, side to side, like a lantern on a hook. We froze. The glow drifted closer, though no footsteps broke the silence. Closer still, until I swore I could see the shape of a hand, long and pale, holding the handle. Travis whispered, "That's him." "Don't," I hissed. But Travis took a step forward. The light stopped, hung in the air like it was waiting. Then it swung, sharp, deliberate, beckoning. "Travis." I grabbed his arm, but he yanked free, stumbling toward it. I don't remember screaming, but my throat hurt after. I don't remember running, but my legs burned like fire. All I know is, when I finally burst through the thicket and into the truck's headlights, I was alone. Travis never came back. The search lasted weeks. They dragged the hollow, combed the ridges, sent dogs and helicopters. Nothing. No clothes, no bones, no lantern. When the sheriff asked me what happened, I lied. Said Travis went off on his own. I couldn't say I'd watched him walk into a light that shouldn't exist. But I hear it sometimes when I drive those roads at night. The faint creak of something swinging in the trees, the flicker of a glow in the corner of my eye. Locals say Laurel Hollow is cursed, that the lantern man doesn't just wander. He chooses. And if you see his light, you'd better pray it's not you he's calling. Rowan Creek runs quiet through the Appalachian Hills, but the locals warn travelers never to follow its bends after sundown. The water is said to carry more than stones and fish. Some say it carries voices, echoes of those who never came back. The story. When I was 15, I lived in a small town near Rowan Creek, tucked away in one of the less traveled valleys. My uncle owned an old fishing cabin there. Nothing fancy, just rough-hewn logs, a tin roof, and a wood stove that smoked too much. He would take me out on weekends to fish, telling me it was good for discipline and better than wasting time with town kids. At first, I loved it. The quiet, the sound of water rushing over rocks, the long walks where the forest felt endless. But one night, I learned why folks in town always lowered their voices when the creek was mentioned. It was late September, the kind of evening where the cold crept in faster than you expected. My uncle had dozed off in the cabin, snoring with his boots still on, while I decided to step outside. I wanted to hear the creek in the dark. Something about the sound always calmed me. I walked down the narrow trail, flashlight in hand, and reached the bank. The water glimmered in silver streaks under the moonlight. But as I stood there, I noticed something strange. The current wasn't steady. It seemed to pulse like it was breathing. I thought it was just my imagination until I heard the first whisper. It came from downstream. A voice, faint, almost drowned out by the sound of water. It was calling my name. Eli. I froze. No one but my uncle knew I was out here. No one in town even cared enough to follow. And yet, the voice was clear. I should have turned back, but I didn't. Curiosity always outran caution at that age. I started walking along the bank, following the whisper. My flashlight beam shook over the rocks and roots. Every few steps, I swore I saw a movement in the trees, a shadow slipping behind a trunk, something ducking low. The voice grew louder, but it wasn't steady. Sometimes it was ahead of me, sometimes behind. Sometimes it came from across the creek, though no bridge crossed it. Always, it said the same thing. Eli. By the time I realized how far I had gone, the cabin lights were gone. I was deep in the woods, the kind of place even hunters avoided. The trail was gone too. That's when I saw him. Standing knee-deep in the creek was a man, or at least something shaped like one. He was tall, taller than anyone I'd ever seen, and thin to the point of breaking. His clothes hung in tatters, dripping wet, as if he'd been walking in the water for years. But it wasn't his body that froze me. It was his face, or rather, the absence of one. From his forehead down to his chin, there was nothing but smooth, pale skin. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just a blank canvas stretched too tight. Yet somehow, the whisper came louder now. Not from his head, but from inside mine. Eli. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. The thing tilted its head, like it was studying me without eyes. Then, slowly, it lifted one long arm and pointed downstream. I don't know why, but I felt pulled, like if I didn't follow, something worse would happen. My legs moved without my permission, carrying me along the bank while the hollow man walked in the water beside me, always knee-deep, always pointing. The creek grew narrower, the trees denser. My flashlight began to flicker. Panic set in. I finally screamed, a broken, terrified sound that snapped the silence of the valley. That's when my uncle appeared, crashing through the trees with his shotgun. His face was pale, eyes wide like he'd seen me walking straight toward death. He grabbed me by the arm, yanking me back so hard I fell. When I looked again, the hollow man was gone. The creek flowed as it always had. Only the moonlight moved over the water. My uncle didn't yell. He didn't even ask what I was doing. He just dragged me back to the cabin, locked the door, and sat with his shotgun across his lap until morning. When I finally dared to ask, weeks later, he only said, "Never answer a voice by the creek. If you hear it, walk the other way. If you see him, don't let him point you downstream. Nobody who follows ever comes back." I never went near Rowan Creek again. But sometimes, when I dream, I still hear it. That whisper curling through the dark. Eli, I grew up in the shadow of the Appalachians, the kind of place where the mountains swallowed the horizon and the woods pressed right up to your back porch. Folks there live hard but quiet lives, and most of us carried a healthy respect, or maybe fear, of what the deep woods could hide. My father used to tell me never to go wandering after dark, not because of bears or bobcats, but because, as he said, some things in the woods aren't made of flesh and blood. I thought it was just mountain superstition, until the fall I turned 17. The dare. It was the first week of October, the air sharp with the smell of burning leaves. My friends and I had been drinking by the old quarry, the way we always did when we wanted to feel grown. Someone brought up the Lantern Man, a story passed around by kids but never spoken about by adults. Supposedly, if you walked a mile into Black Hollow after dark, you'd see him, a figure carrying an old oil lantern that never went out. If he looked at you, you'd vanish into the woods, never to be seen again. Drunk bravado makes fools out of smart kids. That night, it made one out of me. "Bet you won't go." My buddy Kyle slurred, his grin wide and mean. "I'll go." I shot back before I could think. 1 mile in, "I'll even bring something back to prove it." They laughed, slapped my back, handed me a flashlight, and pointed toward the tree line. My gut twisted, but I wasn't about to back down. Into Black Hollow. The woods swallowed me. Hold a second. I stepped off the gravel road. My flashlight beam cut a weak tunnel through the darkness, barely catching the skeletal arms of trees overhead. Every crunch of leaves under my boots sounded too loud, like the woods were listening. A mile. That was all. I counted my steps, tried to steady my breathing. Halfway in, the night grew wrong. The air turned damp, and the smell of rot, like wet earth and mildew, filled my nose. My light flickered. I smacked it, cursed, and kept walking. That's when I heard it, the faint clink of metal, steady and rhythmic, like someone tapping glass with a ring. I froze. It came again. Clink, clink, clink. Somewhere ahead of me, a glow moved between the trees. Soft, golden, swaying gently. A lantern. The Lantern Man appears. I told myself it was a hunter, maybe some old-timer with gear from another century. But as the figure drew closer, my breath lodged in my chest. He wasn't walking right. His steps didn't crunch on the leaves. He seemed to float, gliding between the trees as the lantern swung. The light hit his face, and it wasn't a face at all, just shadow, like the darkness itself was wearing the shape of a man. I ducked behind a tree, heart hammering so loud I swore he'd hear it. The lantern stopped swinging. The glow froze, steady, as if he turned directly toward me. The chase. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just bolted, crashing through brush, branches clawing at my arms. Behind me, I heard the sound, not of footsteps, but of that lantern's faint clink growing faster, closer. No matter how fast I ran, the glow stayed just behind me, always at the edge of my vision. I dropped my flashlight. Didn't care. All I wanted was out. The trees grew tighter, like the woods themselves were closing in. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but still I pushed. Every time I dared glance back, the glow was there, swaying, closer, closer, closer. And then, silence. The sound stopped. The glow was gone. The whisper. I staggered to a stop, doubled over, gasping for breath. My ears rang in the sudden quiet. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Low, almost kind. "Stay." The voice wasn't from behind me. It came from inside my head, like the woods themselves were speaking. My vision blurred. The air turned thick, heavy, as though the trees leaned in closer, pressing me still. Every instinct screamed, "Don't look." But I did. He was standing 10 feet away. The lantern man, his shadow face tilted, curious, the glow painting the leaves in sickly yellow. The whisper grew louder, pressing against my skull. "Stay." The escape. I don't know how I broke free. Maybe it was sheer terror, maybe dumb luck, but I hurled myself sideways through a tangle of brush, ignoring the cuts and scrapes tearing across my skin. My boots found a deer trail, and suddenly, like a miracle, I saw the faint orange glow of the quarry fires in the distance. I didn't stop until I burst from the tree line, covered in mud and bleeding from scratches. My friends stared, laughter dying in their throats when they saw my face. "What the hell happened?" Kyle asked. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I just shook my head. Aftermath. For days, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that lantern swaying, that shadow thing tilting its head. My parents thought I'd gotten into a fight. My friends thought I was faking. I never told them the truth. Weeks later, I drove past Black Hollow. In the daylight, it looked like any other patch of woods. But as the sun dipped low, I caught a glimmer between the trees. A faint, golden glow. It wasn't the sun, and I swear, it tilted, just a little, like someone had lifted a lantern, waiting for me to come back. I grew up in a small pocket of southern West Virginia, the kind of town where the mountains seemed to wrap around you like a coffin lid. We didn't have much, just a gas station, a handful of houses, and one Baptist church that doubled as a community hall. Folks around there didn't like talking about what happened deep in the woods. They'd tell you about deer trails, about the creeks where the trout used to run, about moonshiners back in the day, but never about the dark corners. And yet, everyone knew where those corners were. We just didn't give them names. But one of those places had a name, and it stuck with me since childhood. Deadwater Hollow. I never want to go there, but life has a way of putting you in the wrong place at the wrong time. The dare. I was 17 when it happened. Just young enough to feel invincible, but old enough to be stupid. My buddies and I, 3 of us in total, were sitting on the rusted tailgate of my friend Dale's truck, drinking warm beers we'd swiped from his dad's cooler. The sun had dropped behind the ridge, painting the sky orange, and the cicadas were screaming their heads off. That's when Dale brought it up. "You boys ever been to Deadwater?" he asked with a crooked grin. We all knew the stories. Folks said the hollow was cursed, that anyone who stayed there past midnight came back different, if they came back at all. Some said it was moonshiner lies, just to keep nosy kids away. Others whispered about a man who lived there once, a man who was never right in the head. "Hell no," I answered, trying to sound tougher than I felt. "Ain't no reason to go down there." But Dale wouldn't let it go. He slapped the truck bed and said, "Tell you what, I'll give $20 to the man who can stay there till sunrise." That's how it always starts, doesn't it? Not with bravery, with pride. Into the hollow. We set off just before dark. The path into Deadwater Hollow wasn't a real trail. It was little more than a deer track winding down the slope, thick with brambles. Every step down, the air grew heavier, wetter, like walking into a cellar. The trees down there weren't like the ones up top. They leaned together, tangled and sickly, as if the forest itself wanted to close you in. And the ground. I'll never forget the ground. Muddy, but not just from water. It smelled like rot, like something had been seeping out of the earth for a long, long time. By the time we reached the bottom, night had swallowed us whole. The only light we had was a lantern Dale carried, its glow barely pushing back the dark. We picked a spot near a black, stagnant pool that folks said gave the hollow its name. The water didn't move, not even when the wind stirred. It just sat there, dark as oil. I wanted to turn back then. My gut screamed at me to leave. But pride's a cruel master. So we set up, passed the lantern around, and tried to laugh off the unease creeping into our bones. The man with hollow eyes. It must have been close to midnight when we first heard it, the crunch of leaves. Slow, deliberate, circling. Probably a deer, Dale whispered, though his voice shook. But the sound wasn't like a deer. It wasn't skittish. It was steady, patient. I raised the lantern and pointed it toward the sound. That's when I saw him. A man, tall and gaunt, standing just beyond the tree line. His clothes were ragged, hanging off him like they'd been rotting on his frame for years. But it wasn't his clothes that froze me. It was his face. Or rather, the lack of one. His eyes weren't eyes at all. They were holes. Hollow sockets, empty and black, but somehow I knew he was staring right at me. And when he smiled, God help me, his teeth looked like splinters of bone, jagged and wrong. We all went dead silent. No one breathed. Then Dale, fool that he was, shouted, "Who the hell's out there?" The man didn't answer. He just tilted his head, slow as a dying branch. Then he took a step forward. The chase. Panic tore through us like wildfire. We bolted, lantern swinging, boots slipping in the muck. I didn't care where we ran, only that it was away from him. But the sound followed. Not fast, not stumbling, just steady. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I dare glance back once. The lantern light caught him gliding between the trees, his head low, his hollow eyes fixed on us. "Don't stop," I screamed, but my friend Tommy tripped on a root. We skidded to a halt, grabbing at him, but it was too late. The man was there, too close. His long, bony fingers reached out, curling around Tommy's ankle. Tommy's scream echoed through the hollow, high and ragged. The lantern flickered, and in that moment of dim light, I swear I saw the man's face shift, pulling tight, as if the hollow itself was stretching his skin. I pulled, Dale pulled, and somehow we wrenched Tommy free. His boot came off in the man's hand, and we didn't stop to see more. We ran until the trees thinned and the mountain air cleared in our lungs. Aftermath. We collapsed on the roadside, gasping. Tommy's ankle was bleeding where the man had grabbed him. Black smears burned into his skin like coal dust. We never spoke of it again. Not to our parents, not to anyone in town. Dale swore it was a trick of the dark, a shared hallucination. But I knew better. Because a week later, Tommy's wound turned septic. Doctors couldn't explain it. They said it was like the flesh was rotting from the inside out. Tommy didn't make it. He died before the month was out. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind cuts through the hollers, I swear I still hear that steady crunch of footsteps behind me. I left West Virginia not long after. But no matter how far I go, I can't shake the memory of the man with hollow eyes. And I know, deep down, Deadwater Hollow is still waiting. I used to tell myself the old mines were just holes in the ground, man-made wounds cut into the mountain and then abandoned when the veins ran dry. We grew up around them, scattered across the hills like scars, their entrances collapsed or chained off with rusting metal gates. Our parents warned us away, and we obeyed for the most part. But every kid in our town had stepped inside one at least once, daring each other to hold a flashlight in the dark and swear we weren't scared. I thought I'd grown out of that fear, until the night something crawled out of mine and followed me home. It started with a storm, the kind that feels biblical. Thunder so heavy it shook the siding of my trailer, and rain so hard it turned the gravel road into a river of mud. The power went out around 9 p.m., which wasn't unusual up here, but the blackout left the whole valley blind. I lit a kerosene lamp and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the storm beat the roof. That's when I heard it, something metallic clattering outside, like a gate being rattled. At first I thought it was just the wind, but the sound kept coming back. A rhythm, like something trying. Pull, slam, pull, slam. I didn't want to look, but the noise was carrying through the night, and after 10 minutes of sitting there with my skin crawling, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. Across the hollow, maybe 200 yards away, I could see the outline of the old number 3 mine. The entrance was sealed by an iron gate that had stood untouched for decades. My beam barely reached it through the sheets of rain, but I swear I saw the gate shudder. Not from wind, from inside. Something heavy throwing itself against the metal again and again. I should have gone back inside, should have locked the door, hidden under a blanket, and prayed it was just my imagination. But fear does strange things. I needed to know. So I pulled on my boots, grabbed my old .22 rifle, and slogged down the hill in the rain. The closer I got, the louder it became. Not just metal rattling, wet, guttural sounds. Groans, like a man whose lungs were filling with mud. My stomach flipped. I told myself it was probably a bear that had gotten trapped. Maybe it had wandered in through a collapsed side tunnel and was trying to get out. That lie was the only thing that kept me moving forward. I reached the gate and shined a flashlight through the bars. At first, all I saw was black. Then movement. Something pale. A hand. But the skin looked wrong, stretched thin and wet, almost translucent. The fingers clawed at the iron, leaving streaks of black muck behind. I stumbled backward, my lights swinging wildly as a face pressed into view between the bars. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a man either. Not anymore. Its eyes were wide, milky, and its mouth opened far too wide, the jaw sagging like it had no bones to hold it up. From that gaping hole came the sounds I'd heard, groans mixed with a bubbling choke, as if it had drowned but somehow kept breathing. I raised my rifle, but my hand was shaking so badly I couldn't aim. The thing slammed against the gate again, harder than before. The metal creaked. Hinges groaned. And then I realized something terrifying. The padlock was gone. The gate was only held shut by the chain, looped once around the handles. One more hit, and it would break. I ran. My boots slipped in the mud, but I didn't dare stop. I sprinted back up the hill, the rain stinging my eyes, my breath tearing my chest apart. Behind me, I heard the chain snap. Then the screech of iron swinging open. Then silence. I didn't hear it chasing me, but I felt it. That pressure, that primal instinct that says you're not alone. I burst through my front door, locked it, and shoved the couch against it. For hours, I sat there with my rifle pointed at the entrance, lamp burning low, ears straining. The storm finally eased, but I never heard footsteps, never saw movement through the windows, just silence. At dawn, I cracked the door open and stepped outside. The world was washed clean by rain, the earth glistening under the pale sun. I told myself maybe I dreamed it all. Maybe fear and storm and shadows had gotten the better of me. But then I saw the prints. Leading from the mine straight to my porch were tracks, handprints and knee prints, as if something had crawled on all fours through the mud. The trail stopped right at my front steps. The last print was a palm, pressed flat against the wood. Too big to be mine. Too human to be an animal's. I moved out of that trailer within the week. I didn't pack much, just what I could fit in the bed of my truck. People in town asked why, and I told them the storm spooked me. I didn't say that sometimes, at night, I still hear metal clattering in the distance. I didn't say that sometimes I wake to the sound of wet hands slapping against wood. And I sure as hell didn't say that the number 3 mine's gate is standing wide open. The thing about living near the Appalachian backwoods is that you learn to recognize what doesn't belong. It's not just the silence, not just the way the forest shifts when you step too far into it. It's the way the land sometimes remembers things people forgot. I was 19 when I came across the cabin. No windows, no chimney, no reason to exist. The trail that shouldn't exist. It was fall, late October, when the woods start burning gold and the shadows stretch long before sunset. I've been deer hunting with my uncle all day, but when he decided to head back early, I stayed out. I thought I knew the trails well enough. I thought wrong. Somewhere between the ridges, I noticed a narrow path I'd never seen before. It wasn't wide enough for an ATV, barely wide enough for a person. No fresh boot prints, no deer tracks, no sign of life. Just a dirt scar through the brush. I don't know why I followed it. Curiosity, I guess. Or maybe something else tugging me forward. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. Birds stopped calling. Even the wind seemed to avoid that place. My boots crunched over dead leaves, and every sound echoed louder than it should. Then I saw it. The cabin in the clearing. A squat, square structure sat in a clearing, its logs darkened with age. The roof sagged in the middle, moss creeping down its sides. But what caught me wasn't the decay. It was the absence. No windows. Not a single one. 4 walls sealed tight, except for one door. My first thought was that it might have been an old smokehouse, but even smokehouses had vents. This place had nothing. Just solid wood, too solid for anything natural. And yet, something about the air around it felt wrong. The clearing was colder than the trail behind me, as if the sun had given up shining there. I should have turned back. Every part of me screamed to. But instead, I reached for the rusted iron latch. The inside. The door groaned when I pushed it open, like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust should have billowed out. Cobwebs should have clung to my face. But there was nothing. No dust, no webs, no sign of time at all. The cabin wasn't empty. The floor was packed dirt, smoother than any barn I'd ever stepped in. The walls were carved with strange markings, shapes that twisted in on themselves like eyes that wouldn't close. And in the center of the room, a chair. It faced the far wall. Wooden. Hand-carved. Waiting. I circled it slowly, my breath catching. The chair wasn't rotting like the cabin. It looked new. The wood gleamed faintly, polished by something I didn't want to imagine. That's when I realized the dirt wasn't dirt. It was ash. The voice. I was about to leave when I heard it. A whisper. Not outside. Not behind me. From inside the cabin. It didn't sound like English. It was low, guttural, almost like the words were bubbling through water. My chest tightened. I spun in a full circle. No one. The walls seemed closer than before, the air heavier. Then the whisper formed into something I understood. Sit. The word crawled in my ears, heavy as stone. The chair scraped. Just a little. As if something unseen had dragged it an inch across the floor. I bolted. The run back. The door slammed shut behind me, so hard the trees shuddered. I didn't even glance back. I tore through the clearing, down the path, branches slapping my face, lungs burning like fire. It took me nearly an hour to find my way back to familiar ground. My uncle was furious, demanding to know why I'd stayed out so long. I told him I got turned around. I didn't mention the cabin. But that night I dreamed of it. The whisper, the chair, the way the walls seemed to lean in. The return. Most people would have buried the memory. Not me. Something gnawed at me for weeks until I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to see it again. When I went back, I couldn't find the path. I combed the ridges for hours. Nothing. No scar in the brush. No clearing. Just endless trees staring back at me. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe hunger. Until the night, I woke up at 3 a.m. and found dirt on my boots. Ash in the tread. The cabin finds you. I've never spoken about it aloud until now. The years have passed, but I still dream of that cabin. And sometimes, when I wake up, I swear I hear a chair scraping slowly across my bedroom floor. The whisper is louder now. Clearer. Sit. The first time I heard the screaming, I thought it was just the wind tearing through the hollow. The Appalachians are full of strange sounds at night. Coyotes yipping, owls shrieking, and the restless rustle of the trees themselves. But this was different. It was too human, too raw. A cry of pain that rose and fell with a rhythm that made my skin prickle. I was 21 then, hiking alone. I know it was stupid. Folks in town had already warned me about venturing past the ridge into Blackwood Hollow, but I was stubborn. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't just another backwoods kid scared of ghost stories. I packed light, a tent, a lantern, and my old hunting knife, more for comfort than anything else. The path into the hollow was narrow, overgrown, and rarely used. Branches clawed at my arms as I pushed through, the air growing thicker the deeper I went. The trees leaned closer together, their crowns blotting out the sun until it felt like dusk, even though it was only late afternoon. That's when I heard it for the first time. A scream, sharp, echoing, but strangled in a way that twisted my stomach. It wasn't an animal. It was a woman. I froze in place, my breath caught in my throat. Hello. I shouted before I could stop myself. My voice bounced off the trees and came back sounding smaller, weaker. No answer. Just silence. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe just some weird animal cry I didn't recognize. I kept walking, faster now, though my heart thudded against my ribs. By the time I reached the bottom of the hollow, the air smelled different, damp sour, like rotting leaves mixed with iron. The ground underfoot squelched, spongy with moisture. I set up my tent quickly, telling myself that if I just stayed the night and made it back, I'd have bragging rights over every other fool who avoided this place. But that night, the screaming returned. It started just past midnight, a low, keening wail that rose into a full-throated scream, echoing from one end of the hollow to the other. My lantern flickered with every cry, shadows jerking and stretching across the thin walls of my tent. I gripped my knife, knuckles white, but I couldn't make myself unzip the flap and look outside. It went on for hours, each scream closer than the last, until I swore it was right outside my tent, circling, circling. Then silence. Just like that, it stopped. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I stumbled out, shaking, half mad with exhaustion. The hollow was quiet, eerily so. No birds, no wind, just a dead, suffocating stillness. My eyes caught something carved into the bark of an old oak near my camp. Words, deep and jagged, like someone had gouged them with a blade. Don't answer her. My mouth went dry. I packed up and started moving as fast as I could up the slope. That's when I saw her. A figure standing at the tree line. Pale, long-haired, her dress torn and stained. She stood with her back to me, shoulders shaking like she was crying. "Are you okay?" I called out before I could remember the warning. She stopped shaking. Slowly, so slowly, her head twisted, not turned, but twisted, around to face me. Her face wasn't right. The skin stretched too thin, her eyes too wide, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream that I could somehow hear inside my head. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my pack. She didn't move toward me, but every step I took away from her made her face stretch wider, her mouth open further, until I couldn't breathe. I ran. I don't remember the climb back up the ridge. I just remember bursting out of the hollow into daylight, gasping like I'd been underwater. The screaming stopped the instant I left, cut off like a blade to the throat. When I finally staggered back into town, I asked around. An old man at the gas station nodded slowly when I told him what I'd seen. "Blackwood Hollow," he said, chewing the words like tobacco. "That's hers. Been screaming there for 100 years or more. Folks say she was murdered by her kin, left to die in the mud. She screams for help every night. Problem is, if you answer her," he spat on the floor, "you don't come back right." I never asked him what he meant. I didn't need to, because sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear her. And I know if I answer, even once, she'll find her way out of the hollow and into my world. There's a house deep in the mountains that no map will show you. Locals say it's been there forever, though nobody admits to building it. Some call it a hunter's cabin. Others swear it was once a church, or a place for meetings the town never wanted remembered. Me? I only know what I saw, and I know I'll carry that night until the day I die. It started like every bad idea does, with curiosity. I've been told not to hike past the ridge near Coldwater Creek. Too much history down that way. An old woman warned me at the diner. Some history needs to stay buried. Her eyes didn't just flash with superstition. They carried fear. Real, heavy fear. So, of course, I went anyway. The forest thickened as I hiked. Pines closed ranks overhead until the daylight was swallowed, and I moved by the dim blue wash of late evening. That's when I saw it. A roofline cutting against the trees, a shape where no shape should have been. The house. Its walls were black timber, swollen and warped as if the forest itself had tried to reclaim it. Windows gaped open like sockets. The porch sagged, but the door stood straight, closed tight, waiting. I told myself I'd just peek inside. One step, maybe two. Enough to satisfy the itch of curiosity. But the moment I touched the doorknob, the forest went silent. No birds. No wind. Even my heartbeat seemed to hush. And then, the knob turned in my hand. The door opened inward. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, old ash, something faintly sweet like rotting fruit. Inside, dust floated thick as fog, disturbed by my intrusion. Yet the air felt heavy, like it belonged to someone else, like I was trespassing on a room still in use. The floorboards groaned under my boots, a sound too loud in the suffocating quiet. That's when I noticed the furniture, arranged neat, untouched, as though the family had just stepped out for a moment. A table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, and above the mantel, nailed crooked into the wood, hung photographs. I froze. The photos weren't old, not yellowed, not cracked. They were recent, and in the dim light, I recognized the faces. Mine, pictures of me, taken from angles I didn't remember, walking out of my apartment, pumping gas at the station, sitting alone on my porch at night. Each image dated in the corner, neat red numbers stamped like film prints. The most recent one had yesterday's date. I staggered back, knocking the frame crooked, and that's when the floor above me creaked. I wasn't alone. I wanted to run, but my legs locked. Every instinct screamed to leave, but my body stayed frozen as the creaking grew louder, slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the ceiling. Dust rained down. The rocking chair shifted, just an inch, as though nudged by an unseen hand. The steps stopped above the stairs, and then they began to descend. The stairs groaned under each weight. I could hear the drag of something heavy, scraping the banister. My breath came shallow, quick, but I couldn't move. My eyes locked on the staircase at the far end of the room, where the shadows deepened. The figure appeared slowly. Tall, too tall for the frame of a man. Shoulders hunched, head cocked at a sick angle, like it had been forced through a shape not meant for it. Its hands gripped the railing, long and thin, nails dragging against the wood. The sound set every nerve in me on fire. But what broke me wasn't its face. It was what it carried. In its hand was a camera. Old, silver, dented. A flash bulb cracked at the top. It raised it to its face, and the click of the shutter filled the room like thunder. The flash went off. For half a heartbeat, the world went white. When it cleared, the figure was closer. At the bottom of the stairs now. Another click. Another flash. Each time, it leapt nearer, impossibly fast, stuttering through light and shadow like the photographs above the mantel. I finally found my legs. I bolted through the doorway, crashing into branches, tearing my arms on thorns, the world a blur of terror and pain. Behind me, I could still hear the clicking, the flashes popping through the trees, lighting the forest in bursts like lightning. I didn't stop running until I burst out onto a logging road, collapsing under the dull, orange glow of the moon. No flashes followed me there. No camera clicks. Only the sound of my own ragged breathing. That was 3 years ago. I moved states, changed jobs, cut ties with the mountains. But some things follow. Last week, a package arrived at my new apartment. No return address. Inside was a stack of photographs, wrapped with a rubber band. The first picture was of me, asleep in my bed. The last one, me, standing in front of the very apartment door where I opened the package. And this time, the date printed in red wasn't yesterday. It was tomorrow.